Gonna be honest with you, I'm really happy to be back this week. Let's talk some things that we should note from week 3.
Do you have the time to listen to me grind? Take down the film watchers and nerds all at once.
Yeah, I want to do things a little different this week. I had some great comments. Actually, DMs telling me they really look forward to the YouTube channel, which, wow, appreciate that. I really do. This is week 3. We've been talking about it for a while. Me and Zach Reed have both got threads on it. I have 2 article series going with DLF right now that are essentially trying to capitalize on the fact we know more than we think we do before the majority think we do in Dynasty Fantasy Football, but that's also true in the weekly game. On a week-by-week basis, you can always say it's one game. You can say right now any player is at max a 3-game sample, and that is perfectly accurate. But we do know more than we think we do. I have broad tax. Dynasty is about adding value. It's a thing that doesn't exist in redraft or keeper leagues, really. That might seem weird to you because points are cool, and I have a tendency to lean heavy towards points because I play in leagues with very sharp Dynasty players, and I can't wait. But you're also trying to do it in a way where you don't lose or maybe even gain value unexpectedly. It's not just the younger players who can be undervalued right now and end up being more valued later. Trying to exploit edges and where we get things wrong is really how we go about that. And one of the last frontiers of places we feel overconfident is how quickly we know things. What am I talking about? I've heard a lot of conversation on Twitter and also in various discourse and even on the DLF forum about how strong wide receiver scoring has been this year. So my first question is it? Because my first initial impulse is always to disagree with whatever anyone says. So I went and looked it up, and it turns out, yeah, wide receivers are popping off this year, and a number of 50-point games at least, and especially in special scoring formats, and kind of tell you that. But in week 3, it's getting really difficult, by the way, to keep track of the fact that I'm always talking about the week before, where the current week is going on. I'm actually getting a little bit of... Yeah, we're scoring more points at the wide receiver position in general, also scoring less at running back, and we're scoring less at tight end, and we're actually doing slightly worse in quarterback scoring overall. However, I like to ask the question, is it though really? Let's check. I went and looked at my little points per game table that I've got in my weekly database, both the free version and the Patreon-only version, and I edited it a little bit. I know, cute special coding noises. And I wanted to look at points per game by position by week 3. And by week 3, we are averaging more points per game at the wide receiver position in 2022 than each of the last 3 years. The average, if we want to go back to 2018 and look at the average, wide receivers up to week 3, what occurs to you looking at that is probably what occurs to me, which is, man, really only like 1 point greater than the average? I thought it was much bigger. But last week, you'll remember a lot of different players, from Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, on down to someone we don't care about, actually regressed a little bit, the position as a whole. Now, other wide receivers had 1-game pop-offs, but it wasn't the guys that we were starting or that already scoring in the top 12. So how can we dig into that a little bit further? What can we learn about how much we know now that we could know in the future? Here's another little table. Again, all this data is literally pinned to my timeline and pinned to Patreon. You can do this for running back or tight end or quarterback. Last year we had a player at wide receiver scoring over 90 points by week 3. That's obviously Cooper Kupp. But we don't have that this year. We do have 2 players scoring over 80 points, which is Stephon Diggs and, surprisingly enough, Cooper Kupp. But we didn't have 1 player over 90. We do have 2 players scoring over 70 points this year through 3 games, which is pretty amazing. Last year we only had 1. But we also had 4 players scoring over 60 points last year by week 3, total points. And this year we only have 2. We also, in both years, have 5 or 6 players scoring between 50 and 60 points. Again, you check the table or check my database to check that I'm right on that. But I mean, it's different, right? But it's not that different. Wide receivers aren't really scoring that much when you look at it play by play through the top 12 players and points per game right now. But that seems a little weak, right? That's just looking at 12 names in 2 different years. Tyler Boyd did go off last year. Noah Brown went off the week before. I mean, wide receiver scoring feels high. What could we possibly learn from that? That brings me to this table, which I will insert in post. I don't know why I paused as if the click would. Anyway. By week 3, about 50% of all wide receivers who finished in the top 12 since 2018 were already averaging over the points per game average of top 12 wide receivers. Now, that's a sentence. That's a long sentence. I'm going to give you a second to think that one through. Now, let me be clear on this. This table is looking at all players up to week 3 since 2018. So it's not 50% of all players in every year were already over the threshold, but we're taking a broader sample saying on average we should expect, because we only have so much time, like by week 3, that's when we hit the 50% mark. By week 6, we pretty much know who the top 12 players are, but there are often, by week 9, if you don't know who the top 12 players are, it's already too late. That's a problem. By the time you get to week 9, you're more than halfway through the season. It's too late. Consider the 2021 table. All of these players look fantastic through 3 weeks. Last year, we were hot to trot on the viability of the wide receiver position. How many of these players finished over 20 points per game? 3. Also, note that 5 of these players didn't finish in the top 12. It's not just Mike Williams, who you might remember, Tyler Lockett, and Adam Thielen, who you're already chuckling at. Haha, so old. But it's also Brandon Cooks and DJ Moore, 12. Now, you note they're all good players. There's no need to write them off as they had no fantasy upside. Expecting about 50% of the table overall to finish in the top 12 by itself, that means half of it is fake, or slightly less than half of it in general on average. And while Christian Kirk, Curtis Samuel, Marcus Brown, who will all finish the season as fairly useful players, and have less than a 17% expected point share of their overall offense, that's something that players who fall out of this top 12 category actually have in common. Now, there are exceptions. If we were to flip back to the 2022 table, you notice that Jamar Chase by week 3 is already in the top 12, and he's getting 12% of the team's expected points. Efficiency exists. The problem with 2022, we flick back to the 2022 table, everyone's over at least 3 points per game over expected, except for at least 2 of the players I mentioned who are less likely to finish inside the top 12, Curtis Samuel and Marcus Brown. Everyone else, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, and Tyreek Hill are operating at least 5 points above expected. Their production should come down. That doesn't mean they won't finish inside the top 12 because their expected point share is actually over 18%. But it does mean it's a lot harder to read where the other 2 or 3 players who won't finish in the top 12 currently are. Data point. Yeah. 12, which brings us to another point. That consistency of about just less than half the top 12 players not finishing inside the top 12 is relatively consistent. In 2018, 5 wide receivers currently inside the top 12 finished outside the top 12 by the end of the season, one of them being Will Fuller. In 2019, 6 wide receivers currently inside the top 12 by this point in the season finished outside the top 12 by the end of the season, one of them being DJ Chark. Don't want to belabor these points. It's just relatively it's just striking how consistent this performance is. And so those 6 or so, Diggs, Kupp, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, and Tyreek Hill, and Devontae Adams, because he's lower down on the list, and and AJ Brown are all players that occupy 18% or more of their team's expected points. And I don't think there's a great reason to expect them to fall out of it yet. So, what am I talking about this week? I'm talking about how there are 7 wide receivers currently inside the top 12. You should feel very comfortable with expecting them to finish inside the top 12 by the end of the year. But that also means you should know that there are 5 players currently not inside the top 12, and we should expect them to have suddenly better performances than they've had already. We know more than we think we do at this point, and some of it is exactly what we don't know yet. Go looking for players with more volume than they have currently produced at every position, especially if it's been consistent over 3 games, but underperforming it. All right, that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about today. It's basically the subject of my 2 articles, and I really got interested in it because I saw a lot of people talking about how much the wide receivers are scoring lately. And the truth is, more players are being more efficient, which I think means they are more striking to watch while scoring the points. Anyway, let me know what you think. That's not me reliving what was going on last week, partly because I did that for the Dynasty Crossroads, and maybe I want to do something different for the YouTube channel. But I think this is really interesting. So let me know what you think. Thanks for checking it out. Thanks for all the comments this week. I really appreciate that. You've got no idea. Not just on the YouTube comments, but in DMs and on Twitter. It helps out a lot, so I appreciate it. Yeah. Have a nice day. Bye.
Do you have the time to listen to me?